Hello class, we are going to be learning about the creation of life over the next couple lectures. This is quite a long topic and kind of hard to answer without going into a lot of detail. So I have tried to make it a little bit easier and underline the things that I really want you to know, but wanted to give you the full explanation, the full reason, the full answer to the way in which I understand how life was created. So we will likely need more than one video, but this will be the start of video 1. So let's start by remembering our definition of life that we did earlier this week, I believe. So life is the state characterized by the ability to get and use energy, reproduce, grow, and respond to change. So we talked about this earlier, but it's a state of being. You are either dead or alive. If you have the ability to get and use energy, as we do as humans, through food, or we also have the ability to reproduce, to have babies and offspring. We're able to grow, and we also can respond to change. So let's also ask what is common among all living things. By looking at what's in common, we can kind of determine what was needed when life was first created. So the first thing is there's an idea called the central dogma of biology. So this is the 3 steps in which all cells convert DNA, which is our information storing molecule, into gene products, which I think we mentioned a little bit about genetic material earlier. So those 3 stages are transcription, translation, and replication. We will learn all about DNA later in the year. This is kind of an introduction. Right now, we're going to focus on the fact that all cells contain proteins, lipids, and nucleic acids. So we know those 3 things are in every cell, and every living thing is made up of cells. So we need to try to understand where each one of these came from. The first thing is, let's talk about the environment though. So early Earth was actually a little bit, well, I should say the rays of the sun during the time of early Earth, which was billions of years ago, was much less intense than it is today. The sun would not have felt as hot, and our evidence of this is that we can look at life cycles of stars, of other stars, rather than our own Earth, and determine that when stars are a little bit younger, they don't produce as much energy. So we also had an atmosphere, but it was a very different atmosphere. So it was mainly formed by methane and carbon dioxide. Methane is CH4, carbon dioxide is CO2. These things are known, we know this was true because we can see the fossils of those very first microorganisms, and determine that those microorganisms did not produce oxygen. They only produced, they only used methane and carbon dioxide. So just to quickly talk about a microorganism, is like a very small but little bug, little cell that can often live in very extreme environments. So it's it is thought of as one of the first things to be alive, to show life, was these microorganisms. We also know that there was liquid water present. And how did we know it was liquid water? Well, we can look at the types of rocks we have today. So some of our oldest rocks that we have are in Greenland. Now we can look at the types they are because every rock looks a little different. A rock that was produced by lava looks very different than a rock that was produced by being close to water in a sandy area. So if we see rocks that are called sandstones, sand being the main the main material inside, it shows us that there was liquid water present, because sand is always near some kind of water. Also, we know at this time that no asteroids were hitting the Earth. When we were talking about the formation of the Earth, we talked a lot about how rocks were hitting the Earth and kind of helping with our layer formation. But at this time, we know that there was no more asteroids, and our evidence for this is we can calculate the effects of an asteroid and how an asteroid would heat up the Earth too much for life to be on it. So many people believe that an asteroid is what killed the dinosaurs. So we know that those asteroids had to stop hitting us for us to start having life. We can also know that we would need shelter from the sun's radiation. So there was some kind of land or rock shelter for life to be created, and we know this because it was a very different atmosphere. So today we have what's called ozone. Ozone is produced by oxygen interacting with the sun's energy, and that creates a very protective layer over our atmosphere, so that the sun, the thing that gives us sunburns from the sun, that energy, doesn't hurt us as bad. Back in early Earth, there was no ozone, so it is thought that those damaging rays, that damaging energy that causes sunburns for us now, would be 1,000 times more damaging back then, and really just kill any kind of life. So it is very similar to Earth today, but with these key differences that we just outlined. It would have had a lot of liquid water, like our oceans today. There would have been land masses and islands, like we see today as well. So let's first talk. We have our three things that every cell has. Let's first talk about lipids. So we first need to define a lipid. Again, anything that's underlined, I would love for you guys to write down. Everything else is just information. So a lipid is an organic compound that has a long chain of fatty acids that are insoluble in water. So let's break that down. An organic compound is a compound containing a lot of carbon and hydrogen and oxygen, also nitrogen. It is a long chain of fatty acids, so that are insoluble in water. So fatty acids are a specific type of organic material. It is what's in a lot of oil and a lot of carbohydrates. It has a lot of carbon in it, but the important part is that they're insoluble in water. So water mixing with lipids causes them to have a heterogeneous mixture, a very distinct layer of water and lipid. The lipid, as you guys may have noticed, when you're cooking with oil and then go to try to clean your plate or pan, that oil just with water, that oil will ball up and the water won't mix with it. So insoluble means it won't mix. We have this really cool demonstration of lipids surrounding water. So on the inside of these balls is water, and on the outside is a lipid layer. So that is kind of how cells are made. We can look down below and see the outside of each of these types of cells has this lipid layer. It's very important to know that this lipid layer, it acts as a barrier for the cell. Much like our skin is kind of a barrier for our own organs and blood and everything, this is the barrier for the cell and is incredibly important. And it is likely that many lipids came together when in water because they were all insoluble. So by coming together, they could not mix with the water and kind of create their own little ball like they have over on this video. And then the last thing is the materials needed to create a lipid likely came from compounds of hydrogen and carbon dioxide, and these elements were likely broken down by being next to very, very hot vents in the ocean. So there are places in the ocean where the crust is cracked and it goes straight from the mantle into the ocean. And that is incredibly hot, and so it is thought that around those vents that hydrogen and carbon dioxide were able to be broken down to create lipids. Awesome. So we understand where lipids came from. Now we need to look at our nucleic acids. Again, let's start by defining what a nucleic acid is. So it is the main information carrying molecule of the cell. And there are two main types of nucleic acids, DNA, which many of you might have heard of, and RNA, which is a little less known. Each of these are made up of a sugar molecule, a phosphate group, and a nucleotide. But where did we get the materials for all of this to get made? The thought is that each of these individual pieces were floating around in the ocean, or maybe even a shallow part of the ocean. And there were clay particles that were really sticky that were able to grasp, or maybe a sugar. These are sugar molecules. Maybe one of these sugars came and got stuck to this clay. And then maybe a phosphate group got stuck right next to it. And then a nucleotide got stuck. And they were able to be close enough to actually form into a nucleic acid. These materials are thought to have come, that sugar group, that phosphate group, and those nucleotides were thought to have come on a meteorite, because it was very difficult to make from inorganic materials, from rocks and different gases. It's really hard to make a sugar and a phosphate group, and nucleotide, so it is thought that it was arrived on Earth with one of the meteors and asteroids hitting the Earth a long time ago. But which one came first, DNA or RNA, and why? So it is believed that RNA came first because it's single-stranded and simpler. So we have this nice picture off to the right. We can see there are two main strands of DNA, one on the kind of coiling on the left and one on the right, and then we can look at our RNA and see that it just has one of these backbones. So it takes a lot less material, and it's also a lot simpler to make. This also allowed for it to change and evolve quicker. It's easier to break down something with just one strand than with two. It also, RNA, a really important part, can be used for enzymes, which help make proteins. So it is not, RNA especially, is not only a information carrier, but it can be used to help make proteins, which is crucial for figuring out where proteins came from. So our evidence of this is, today we can look at some of our simplest bacteria, some of those microorganisms, and DNA is not present in them. But we do find that there is RNA present in them, and so we believe that early life was an RNA world. I'm going to stop this video here before we get to the next slide. Again, I'm sorry, this is so much information, but definitely I don't want you to memorize this all, but please pay close attention to the things I have underlined. I will see you guys in the next video.